welcome to our second Zoom meeting. Sorry, we're still trying to find our feet a bit here, but I just like to thank Lena and Peter for this idea of doing what we started last month. It was very successful, and I really appreciate the thought of doing this, because it's bringing everyone together, and I think it's fantastic. And I had about 18 or 19 messages and phone calls after it finished last month, and everyone rang and congratulated us. So it was great to hear all the feedback and really appreciate it. We've got a lot to go on to tonight, so I'm going to be quick, but we've got a couple of special guests. I'd like to introduce this gentleman now. He was born in Athens, Greece, on the 21st of June 1971. He's got a long record, so I'm not going to read everything out. In 2003 to 2006, he was the head of the consular section of the Greek embassy in Berlin. In 2006 to 2009, Chancellor and Embassy and Head of Chancellor Section of the Greek Embassy in Ukraine. In 2009 to 2011, the Chancellor of A5 Directorate for Russia. 2011 to 2013, he was the Chancellor of C1 Directorate for the EU External Affairs. In 2017, he's Chancellor of A1 Directorate for European Countries, Minister of Foreign Affairs. In 1990 to 1995, he studied at the Faculty of Law at the Aristotle University in Thessaloniki in Greece. He studies French, or he knows French fluently. He's married with 2 daughters. He's a very approachable and very friendly person. And on the 29th of December 2017, he became our Consul-General of Greece, Dimitrios Michalopoulos. Thank you very much for your time, Dimitrios. You there, mate?
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Yeah, that's all in the past. And well, it brings me about to the end of my term of office here in Melbourne. Sadly, I have to announce that to you now. Well, I'm supposed to leave by a little before Christmas, but it's been very enjoyable so far. And can I say that I had the chance of participating in one of the events of the Castellarisian Association. That was last year, of course, when we had meetings. It was the awards for the Castellarisian of the year. I always remember that. It was a very fine event held at the premises of the association, if I'm not mistaken. Well, a few things about the consulate right now. As you know, we have to respect the laws and regulations that have been put in place by the state government. And right now, the consulate is not open to the public. We don't have new appointments. And we haven't been open to the public since early July this year. So this has been almost like a leap year as far as our work is concerned. Because we were also closed during March, April, and May. So as you can understand, it's been quite a challenging year, 2020. We follow the announcements of the state government, and hopefully we will relax some of our precautionary measures, hopefully by the end of October and more generally by the end of November. You will follow our announcements in the press, Neos Cosmos, radio, etc., 3XY, where we will announce the gradual reopening of our services. Right now, what we're doing is servicing only certain appointments from our for registration of deaths, marriages, and births, which we have a very long queue there waiting for us, and so we have to do something for them, as well as notarization, issuing of documents such as powers of attorney. The reason we have decided to be open and service the public on those areas is because offices in Athens, such as courts, and anything concerning legal documents are open. Therefore, there is always pressure to regulate pending issues that some people might have here in Australia concerning their relations with the Greek legal system. This is the only thing that we do right now, except of course if we have something also very extraordinary and we have to notarize the document urgently for somebody. If he wants to apply, let's say, for citizenship here, he needs some notarization of documents, then we can help. That's pretty much what we do. We're not technically open to the public, and we won't be functioning as normal, at least until the end of November. Then I think we will assume regular work, hopefully so, if everything goes well. In order, of course, this is not my prerogative, this is not the decisions of a single person, but because I have to take care of the health of the employees of the Consulate-General, but also the health of the general public, which can come to the office for something urgent. So once again, I have to request, I think, the understanding of the Greek community in Melbourne, and specifically the understanding of the Castellorisian Association for this disturbance. But we're not the only ones. All other consulates here in Melbourne either function with skeleton staff or have curtailed their activities. We're not the only ones. So this small introduction about what we do here. Now, I think you wanted to hear something more about the situation in Greece.
Yes, Consul-General, yes.
And the situation around the beautiful island of Castellorizo. Well, Castellorizo was, of course, as you remember, until a month ago, in the headlines of every news agency around the world. And the reason was not always positive. It wasn't about how beautiful the island was and what a tourist destination it is. It was about the provocations of neighboring Turkey vis-a-vis the island of Castellorizo. I think we're past now that phase of quasi-military confrontation between Greece and Castellorizo, between Greece and Turkey. Turkey tried to create some fait accompli, meaning to create a situation around the island of Castellorizo, which, as they thought, would benefit their version of events and their version of, or their interpretation of international law. That failed. And that failed because Greece had a very positive and determined stance from early on. So the attempts of Turkey to send its exploratory and prospecting ship in the maritime zones around Castellorizo, which, by the way, have not been determined between Greece and Turkey, was an action that was condemned internationally, specifically by the European Union and its member states, and of course, by Greece. Greece also demonstrated that it has a powerful navy, and that navy can be deployed in all areas where Greece has a stake in maritime zones, and that navy can act as a deterrent in any attempt of Turkey to change status quo or create fait accompli. Now, this phase has ended, hopefully. The government of Turkey has listened carefully to the statements made by the European Union and has decided, thankfully, to pursue a solution of the outstanding problem between Greece and Turkey, which is the delimitation of maritime zones, diplomatically. So right now, Turkey has only one solution, one path to follow. And that path to follow is to start with Greece, an exploratory round of discussions that will lead to, finally, at the end of the line, to the delimitation of those maritime zones. The other alternative for Turkey is, of course, not to conduct these exploratory talks and continue the path of creating problems and creating tensions around the Eastern Mediterranean and the Aegean Sea. However, it has been made clear to Turkey by the European Union that they will face sanctions if they do so. Turkey is not in a position to defy the European Union and defy the possibility of those sanctions. Why? Because its economy is, I wouldn't say in tatters, but it has some structural problems. It's facing some structural problems. Therefore, they don't have the luxury to open another front with the European Union, this time on the economic and trade level. So what the situation where we are right now today, actually, is that we expect Turkey to agree with us on a date to meet in Constantinople and start those exploratory talks. This is the situation we stand right now. And well, if there's a couple of questions or anything else you want to comment about the situation in Greece, you can ask me and I will reply if I can. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Consul General. Just one question I think a lot of people always ask themselves is, why can't the Greeks and the Turks, we know the rich sources that we've got in our waters, why can't they work together and share it? Why do they want to be greedy and take over and not share the wealth that's in those waters?
Well, that's a question for the Turks, actually, not for us. We are ready to cooperate, and Greece has been advocating for years now that instead of tension with Turkey, we should have economic cooperation, and that economic cooperation will be a win-win situation for both countries. Unfortunately, the other side doesn't want to understand those benefits, and they insist on their own interpretation of international law, which is absolutely ludicrous, if you ask me, and claims, and they continuously raise claims on maritime zones that haven't yet been defined. Okay. So what Greece suggests now is, first of all, before economic cooperation, you need to clarify where each country stands. Therefore, you need to delimit your maritime zones, and that is imperative. Okay. And that is what both neighbors should be doing, and this is what all neighbors do. That's right. This is what Australia and Indonesia have done, and this is what the countries in the Persian Gulf have done, and this is what the countries in Eastern Mediterranean have done. You know, Lebanon, Israel, Cyprus. So why is it that Greece and Turkey cannot do it? Well, one of the reasons is that Turkey hasn't signed the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas of 1982, which determines how this delimitation takes place once and for all. So out of the 193 countries around the world, it's only about a handful, let's say less than 20, about 15, 13 countries, including Turkey, which haven't signed that convention. That raises problems because Turkey claims that since this convention doesn't apply, therefore, international law doesn't really apply between Greece and Turkey, and there are some special circumstances where which apply, and therefore Turkey needs to lay its claims there. This is, of course, not acceptable by Greece. United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas applies to everyone, even to those countries which haven't signed it. They have to abide by the provisions because the provisions create customary law. Okay. But Turkey needs to realize, and that's what Greece has done over the past few months. It has really explained to Turkey that there is no other alternative but cooperation and dialogue. In the other alternative that Turkey seeks, which is creating crisis, creating fait accomplis, provoking Greece, this is a policy that will yield no results for Turkey. Greece is determined and will defend its territory. It will defend international law. It will defend the application of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas. And it has made that absolutely clear to Turkey. Okay. Also, what is made clear to Turkey is that the EU stands by its member state Greece and stands by its member state Cyprus. Therefore, Turkey has to realize that upping the ante and raising the stakes in that area in the Eastern Mediterranean will not yield any positive results for it.
Okay. One question I would ask Consul General was last Saturday, I think it was last week, the Turks sent a drone over to our island and basically antagonised the people on the island by playing the Turkish national anthem and then bombed our flag on the side of the mountain with red paint. What are the feelings now with our government over there? What would they be thinking? What's going to eventuate if they keep antagonising the people on Kastelorizo?
Yeah, well, this act was condemned by the Greek government and the Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it took Turkey about 5 days, I think, for their Minister of Foreign Affairs to acknowledge what had happened, and he also offered some sort of an apology to the Greek side, saying that okay, it wasn't meant, etc. So these are the kind of provocations that in the diplomatic world usually take place a little before negotiation starts. It's actually a way of one of the sides to assert, let's say, quote unquote, assert itself as, let's say, having the upper hand or being able to spoil it or show or make a demonstration or a show of strength. I think that was pretty much ill-fated attempt from the part of the Turks to point out that Turkey is just so close to Kastelorizo and Greece is not. I think that this has been made absolutely clear to them, that Kastelorizo is just as Greek as any other island in the Aegean. And just to point out an argument that sometimes is being used by Turkey and Turkey's parrots, as we say them, meaning an argument that's been repeated in the international press. They usually say that Kastelorizo is about 2 miles away from the Turkish coast, and it's 780 miles away from Athens. Well, that's not exactly true. It may be that it's 780 miles away from Athens, but it's also an equal distance or even more from Ankara. That's the other capital, not the Turkish coast. Second, the distance between Kastelorizo and Rhodos, which is the regional capital of the Dodecanese, is a couple of miles more than the distance between Santorini and Syros, Syros being the regional capital of Cyclades. Therefore, Kastelorizo is not far away from the center of the Dodecanese, which is Rhodos, similarly as in a similar way as Santorini is part of the Cyclades, and nobody denies that. Therefore, and just to point out again that the actions of the Greek Navy has demonstrated that Kastelorizo is very close to Greece. We can defend it and we can protect it. And that is something that has been made clear to Turkey. Now, if Turkey can fly a drone over Kastelorizo, well, I think anyone can fly a drone 2 miles into another country. You know, that's not really, I wouldn't consider that a provocation, more or less like a silly act to be portrayed in the media of that country as a brave act and let's say legitimate quote unquote provocation from their side, which is not, but actually it proves nothing. And it only proves and strengthens our resolve, and it only proves that Turkey has a long way to go before it is considered an honest broker and a truthful participant in the exploratory talks about to begin.
That's unbelievable. All right, thanks very much. I know you want to get back to your family, and I appreciate all your time. Is it all right if I can just mute a couple of people, just a couple of questions from our people that are on the Zoom meeting? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Can you spend a couple of minutes? Is that all right?
Yeah.
George Virginis, would you like to ask a question there, George?
If anyone would like to ask a question, please.
Only 2 questions. So the Consul General is very busy, so So only 2 questions. George, have you got a question you want to ask?
The Dodecanese Federation, which I belong to, we were going to write a letter, but we withdrew at the last minute because we got information that had already been done by other people, being the consulate and the Greek community of Melbourne. Do you think it's advisable if I do follow up with a letter that I'd already proposed to had written? Would it be advisable to send that off now or not? And look, thank you very much. Your presentation was excellent and I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I have to ask for some clarification. What kind of a letter would that be?
Well, it was along the lines of our disapproval, being the Dodecanese Islands, that Gastilorizos being one of them, and that we followed the Member of Parliament's basic synopsis. I've forgotten his exact wording, but it was along those lines that we basically disapprove of Turkey's provocation and upsetting the locals. And in fact, what it had, the bearing was that the tourists were leaving, the economy was already in trouble, and now we're having this extra bit of nonsense from the Turks. We were totally against that, and we're conscious of it, and we're also thinking not only on behalf of Gastilorizos, but Turkey, annoying Rhodos and the other islands, not just those 2, but they're all affected in one way, shape, or another. So
Okay.
I can't recall the Member of Parliament's name. It's just not coming to me, but it was along those lines.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Just a bit. Well, as I've said from the very first day I came here, as Consul General, sorry, I totally respect the autonomy of the associations and unions and communities of Greece here in Melbourne. There is no, let's say, hierarchy between me, the consulate, and all the associations. So you're all free to do what you think it's better to promote your work. That said, when it comes to the issues of foreign policy and security of the Hellenic Republic, it is best if the consulate or the embassy, which conducts, of course, the bilateral relations with Australia, are contacted to suggest a better language or better wording on any proposal or initiative that your association or any other association might want to take. In that vein, I have to point out that what I'm following here in Melbourne, more or less, is the press. I know that the Greek and Turkish issues are not exactly what your foreign policy analysts usually deal with here in Australia. They usually have a knowledge, let's say, half of it, half truths and half lies, and a bit susceptible to propaganda from the other side, unfortunately. And what they usually portray is not really the real picture. So we had some problems with that in the past, especially when it came to migration issues between Greece and Turkey and the whole plight of the refugees from Syria in Greece, where the press wasn't very positive on our positions here in Australia, anyway. So so we tried to correct some of those reports or articles that we've seen, but we were not very successful because the newspapers would simply not publish our point of view. So my idea and my advice, at least to you and everybody else, would be first to follow the press here in Melbourne, in Victoria, because that's where we are, and to point out to the Australian side and to those newspapers and articles and all that, certain discrepancies or mistakes in their reporting. I think this is quite important, and this is something that we can do together. As far as letters being sent, right now, let's say we're not in the phase of confrontation with Turkey. We are
Okay.
preparing for dialogue.
Okay.
Greece has proven during that period of time, since last month more or less, that we are ready for this dialogue. We have there is no provocation from our side. It never has been anyway. We are creating an atmosphere of positivity as far as this dialogue is concerned. We would expect the other side to do so. So I don't think there is any point right now in pointing to the press here in Australia, or to the state government, or,
Yes.
or to the federal government, anything more, because it has already been said. Need I also remind you that Prime Minister Mitsotakis had last month a phone call with Prime Minister Scott Morrison, where he had the opportunity to explain to him the Greek positions on the Eastern Mediterranean. And that was the time of the crisis. So the Australian side has learned from the horse's mouth, if I can use this expression, about where we stand. The letter of the Greek community, signed by Mr. Bibas and some others, was a step in the right direction. And I will encourage all associations in Melbourne and Victoria to examine the possibility to join. To examine the possibility to join these initiatives by the Greek community, because they are in the right direction, and they received a positive reply from Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Needless also to say that our embassy is doing its work in Canberra, reporting and having contacts there with people from the DFAT, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, to explain, of course, the Greek positions every time they get the instructions to do so. So I'm not discouraging anyone. I actually encourage associations to be alert, to be informed about what's going on in Greece. I'm here, if need be, to offer my advice, my assistance, my experience as far as wording is concerned, the language is concerned, if you want that.
Thank you.
I think together we can try to change this narrative that exists in English-speaking press, and sometimes here in Victoria, where both sides are portrayed as arguing about the same thing, and Greece is portrayed as being just as unjust as Turkey is, and Turkey is portrayed as having legitimate rights in maritime zones where it doesn't.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for your time. And on behalf of myself and my committee and the members of this great club, we thank you and wish you all the best for your future endeavours. It's a shame that you're leaving us, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up with that cafe in the next few weeks.
Hopefully so. I'm looking forward to meeting some of you. And, well, wish you all the best in your efforts in what you're doing. This is a lost year. Okay, I mean, I didn't do much this year. We never met, and all associations were pretty silent. Nobody did any special events or whatever. So that means that you're all geared up for next year. Next year is a very significant year. It's the 200th anniversary of the start of the Greek Revolution, the Greek struggle for independence. I think that everybody should put its best efforts to organize here in Melbourne the best events possible. The planning is ongoing. Events have been planned for next year that are, quite extraordinary. The Greek community, which participates under the committee directed by the Archbishop of Australia, Makarios, is very active. They have put up a very nice plan for celebrations next year that will run pretty much the whole year round. So I urge every association, every community to join hands and create a very positive atmosphere for Greece next year. I think that 2021 will be memorable for Victoria and Melbourne in particular, because after the, let's say, home imprisonment of every citizen of Victoria and Melbourne in particular for pretty much half of 2020, I think people would like to go out on the street and celebrate. And what better way to celebrate than with the Greeks of Victoria and Melbourne, who will express their feelings of patriotism and pride for the 200th anniversary. Let's also hope that 2021 will yield some positive results in the relationship between Greece and Turkey. We will not have stupid provocations such as, dropping paint on a Greek flag. Greek and Turkish ships will not meet on disputed zones. And we will have some positive results on exploratory talks. Let's all just hope for that. And with this nice, very, let's say, positive thinking from my side, I would like to thank you all for listening. Usually I talk a lot, as you can see, also, yes, I would like to meet some of you again from the Castelloresian Association. I always had a great time last year, and hopefully we will have a better time this year or next year, not with me though. So wish you all the best. Get organized, get connected with the Greek community, and work together. We're all on the same side. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I hope everyone is happy with that. Thank you for his time. What a great person. I've spoken to him during the week, and he rang up regarding the Castellorizzo, and very, very kind fellow. Really his time. I'm saying it's supposed to be 5-10 minutes, but 1:40. So thank you again, Consul-General. Okay. Lena, do you want to say anything? Thank you. Lena? You right there, Lena? No.
Hello, can you hear me?
All right. Okay.
Yep.
Do you want me to keep going, Lena?
Lovely, Nick, if you introduced our next speaker who kindly has consented to join with us tonight. So I'll hand it over to you to introduce George Kailis and his sister Anastasia Kailis.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to hear my voice again, but I'd like to introduce brother and sister combination Anastasia Kailis and Captain George Kailis. Anastasia will interview her brother from his first journey from becoming a pilot, from spotting whale sharks in Ningaloo Reef in WA, I think it is. And what George was doing was flying out there in a little plane and for the tourist boats. And when they saw the whale sharks, he'd radio back to get all the tourist boats to go out there to find the sharks. So that would have been a fantastic job. And achieving his position of captain at Virgin Australia. Anastasia will also ask George about his role as Vice President of the Federation of Air Pilots Australia during the collapse of Virgin Australia and advocating for the employment of 1,400 employees, which continues to this day. George is originally from Perth and has been flying for Virgin for 18 years. He is married to Elle and have 2 children, Sophia and Alexander. Anastasia is a project communications consultant who called me in February this year and offered her support for the KAV, and I couldn't knock her back, and she's been unbelievable since. Their parents are the late Professor Desmond Kailis, the Dean of Dentistry at the University of Western Australia, and Jasmine Ni Harmanis Kailis, originally from Darwin, and Sister Helene. Their uncles are Professor Stan Kailis and Kerry Harmanis. And without further ado, I hand you over to Anastasia.
Thank you very much, Nick. Welcome, everybody. I'd just like to acknowledge our mother, Jasmine, and our sister, Helene, who have dialed in from Adelaide, and also George's in-laws, Jill and David Jeffrey, good evening. And of course, my lovely sister-in-law, George's wife, Elle, who's with us tonight. And I've just noticed our Nonno, Professor Stan Kailis, is here with us from Perth. Hello, Nonno, lovely to see you. And welcome to our friends and family. It's just absolutely charming to see you all tonight. So, Brother George.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the Castelloresian Association for having me this evening, Lena, Nick. It's it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very honoured. Hello to everyone.
Great. Thank you, George. George, it's not often I actually get to interview you and over Zoom in a COVID environment, so it's certainly a unique situation. So thank you for accepting our invitation. George, we have watched your career, no pun intended, fly from the age of 17. You have incredible resilience and tenacity and a lot of smarts. So we would like to know, what was that moment of truth or that spark inside you that actually blew up to say, I want to be a pilot?
You know, I get asked that question a lot. I'd have to probably say it was fueled from that first sort of trip that we did as a family to the United States as a young boy, and being exposed to air travel from such a young age, and then the excitement of whenever Dad used to go away on any of his business trips, I'd always get quite upset if I couldn't go to the airport and see the aircraft, and just that, I don't know, that buzz that aviation gets, it sort of gets in your veins, and that, I don't know if anybody here has that sort of that feeling of what goes on behind the scenes. How does this all happen? You know, what goes on at an airport, what goes on behind that door in the cockpit, and just my love of aircraft. And also, you know, my mum tells a story of me going or talking about the family, and, you know, my ancestors were captain of the seas, I want to be captain of the sky. And that's where it really took me. And I never really gave up on that wish to become a pilot. And thankfully, my parents were very supportive of it, and trying to tell your father, who spent 30 years at university, that I didn't want to go to university was a big challenge. But he supported me through that process. And yeah, once I left school, I got into university. I didn't choose to go there, and I went down to Jandakot and walked into a flying school and said, I want to be a commercial pilot, and it all went from there.
That's beautiful, George. You've always wanted to fly. You read flying books, you looked in the sky, you watched planes, and it's just been extraordinary to see your career culminating in the captain at Virgin. So I'm very proud of you. And not everybody is blessed knowing what they want to do from the age of 3 or 4, and you certainly had that gift.
Yes, and I'm very blessed to have had that. You know, some people go through their lives and don't ever achieve happiness in their careers, and I can honestly say I truly have, and still do get a buzz out of what I do. But it didn't come without its trials and its tribulations. You know, I spent probably a total of about 6 years away from family and friends, you know, with that first job up at Exmouth. And this is a journey that you'll probably talk to any pilot if you have the opportunity, and I'll tell you the same things. Their journeys are very similar, that, you know, the job takes them far and wide. You meet so many people from so many different walks of life, and it does add to the tapestry of who you are. And pilots are generally very good people to invite to a party, because they can have dinner with the Queen and mix it with you know, a group of lads from the pub in Meekatharra if they have to, because they've done it all. You know, from you know, that was such a wonderful journey, seeing the outback of Australia, and pilots have to build up their flying experiences. There's 2 streams they can go through. They can go through the military, or they can go through the civilian channels, which I did. And you just have to go and build up your flying experience from smaller aircraft, you know, and slowly build it up to bigger and bigger aircraft as time goes on. Exmouth was a wonderful experience. The Ningaloo Reef is a very dear place for me. I'm glad it's now a protected zone. It is a place that is full of wildlife that you've never seen. A super highway of current there with marine life that I had the fortunate opportunity to watch from the air for a good 2.5 years, and just saw some magic things. So when I ever hear of, you know, over the years, people trying to drill over the Ningaloo Reef, I would get very upset. But anyway, it's a protected zone now, so that's wonderful. From there, I went to Port Hedland. I was flying inland to all the Aboriginal communities there, And then from there, I went down to Kalgoorlie and did a couple of years out there in Kalgoorlie, out through the Central Desert, flying to all the Aboriginal communities, mine sites, going around with security guards to a number of mine sites once a week, picking up all the gold, which was really interesting. And by the time we'd get back to the Kalgoorlie airport, we'd have 200 kilos of gold sitting in the back of the aircraft, which used to unnerve me when it was getting unloaded. It's a lot of money when you quantify how many ounces of gold are there in 200 kilos. It's a lot of money. So I got to see a lot of wonderful things. And I went back down to Perth, got a job with Marumba Airlines there. I was flying around the Richard Court's ministry, the Premier at the time, his cabinet, around Western Australia. That was fantastic. It was a wonderful experience working with the politicians. And I got to attend a lot of meetings with those guys. They didn't used to just leave us out of the airport. They'd bring us into town. And so, you know, pilots have a wonderful swath of life experience behind them. From there, I went over to Kendall Airlines in Sydney. That was part of the Ansett group. Lost my job there when Ansett collapsed. Kendall got resurrected out of the ashes during administration, and then was purchased by a Singaporean consortium, is now operating as Regional Express today. And from there, I joined Virgin in 2003, and here I am now, being resurrected my second time round out of an airline that's gone through administration.
Thank you, George. George, I'm just reflecting on our father's journey of going into the regional and remote areas of Western Australia to work with the Indigenous populations to help them with their public health. And you certainly followed Dad in his footsteps by visiting so many Aboriginal communities through your flying.
Yeah, it was fantastic. The Indigenous tribes up around, mainly up around near Port Hedland. There was one out at Jigalong. Some of the elders did remember Dad, which was really interesting. Yeah, it was a real shame that he'd passed before I had the opportunity to do all that. So we could have shared some wonderful stories, and yeah, it was a shame. But they're wonderful people. The Indigenous people, you know, there's so much we can learn from them. They are an amazing group of people. They're very family orientated. They know much more about the land than we do, and they have a lot more respect for the land than we do. And it was an honour, and it was a real privilege to be able to go out to those communities, which are gated. You can't get in there unless you have permits to a lot of their areas. And the Central Desert is just as beautiful as Exmouth. You know, you think of the desert as just being a flat place. There's mountain ranges out there. There's river systems that flow when cyclones come through. It's wildflowers. It's just an incredible place. So I'm very privileged to have been able to do that.
Thank you, George. And look, just on Dad again, our father was made a member of 3 Aboriginal tribes in Western Australia. He was highly respected and had a love for the Aboriginals and their spirituality and their closeness to the earth and to animals. So, gosh, thank you, Dad. So thank you, George. So the next question, George, you've sort of covered about how you actually got into flying. So maybe we'll go to the next question around how did you actually apply to become a pilot with Virgin? What was involved in becoming a pilot for Virgin, and how did you become a captain? And I know there's a lot of sweat and blood and tears involved in this question, George.
Well, it's a very competitive environment to get a job with an airline. There's more pilots than there is jobs. So just like everybody else, you know, you throw your hat in the ring and you get an interview, and they're usually 2-stage processes. They'll also put you into a simulator, psychometric testing. They'll see what your flying skills are. They'll put you in a simulator of an aircraft that you've never flown before. They'll test your rate of learning, and to see what they're essentially doing in those simulator assessments during an interview process is testing your rate of learning. So they know you've never flown this aircraft before. All aircraft are intrinsically different. They have their own idiosyncrasies and they all fly differently. So they need to be managed differently. So they're testing your rate of learning and your improvement during the interview process or the simulated process. There's panel interviews. You'll have 5 or 6 people just peppering questions at you about you, your life. They know you can fly an aeroplane. They know you've got lots of experience. So once they put that aside, and I have been part of interview process. I've been on an interviewer at Virgin before, interviewing candidates. And what we're looking for in a pilot is, yes, we know you can fly. That's great. So we test all that. But then we want to know what sort of person you are, because it's a very intimate environment you're working in. The cockpits aren't that big. You have to be able to get on with people. You have to be able to work together as a team really well. And what we're really ascertaining at the end is, could I go away and spend 4 days with this person? And so the camaraderie that really occurs between pilots is we know so much about each other's families. We follow all the progress of each other's children. There is quite a brotherhood involved in the pilot fraternity, and it's very sad to see where the industry is today. Unfortunately, in my role, we tried to save as many jobs as we could at Virgin. We haven't. We've lost half of that 1,400, Nick, that you mentioned. So 700 of the 1,400 pilots of Virgin have been made redundant to this date. And unfortunately, there may be some more. But yeah, and then you go through the process, you become a first officer, and then it's at a point when you've reached an experience level and they've watched you over the years, they give you the opportunity to go through the selection process and then training to become a captain. And that requires ground schools. It requires another engineering school on the aircraft. And when I went through, it was 8 simulator sessions. Now it's gone up to 9, and they slowly keep pushing you to a level where they want to get you right outside your comfort zone. They want to see what you're like under pressure, right? It's same but different. It's like special forces selection in the sense that they want to push you to a point in those simulators where they want to see where your edge is, and everybody has one, and they want to see how you handle the pressure, and they don't want to take you past the point. But a lot of people don't get through the process because it does bring out sides in you, and it really is an evolvement of yourself when you go through that process to be able to deal with that pressure. And I found it to be a wonderful but very stressful process, and they need to see what guys are like. They need to see that you can handle yourself under a very high pressure situation.
Well done, George. George, I have a fond memory of when you moved into my place in St Kilda, and a couple of days every week I would drive you out to the airport to do your training. And I was driving an English bomb at the time, and it just made it every time to get my brother to training. And that was for 3 months. That's an intense 3-month series of training and tests. And if George had passed, which he had, he was then admitted to Virgin to commence his career. So it's no easy feat, George, and I'm really happy that I could actually help you get to your training all those years ago. So I'm actually thanking you.
Good on you, Stace. And it was really all the encouragement of the family to keep going, because it is a career of trials and tribulations, and we're in another tribulation now. And a trial, tribulation that the airlines come out of, or is going to come out of administration, and the trial of actually going through what I went through back in 2001 when Ansett collapsed. It's a very cyclical industry. It's the canary in the gold mine with everything. It's the first thing to generally get, or one of the first industries to generally get hit whenever there's a crisis, whenever there's something like terrorism or as we're seeing now, a pandemic or financial crisis that we saw in the GFC. It's not an industry that I, a lot of people who have kids, they come up and say, my son wants to be a pilot, or my daughter. And the first thing I ask is, do they really want to do this?
Mm.
It's a fantastic career, but it's going to have some big highs and some big lows. And a lot of people pull out of it and say, I've had enough. I can't keep doing this. A lot of moving. I think I've lost count how many times I've shifted house. It's a very nomadic life until you finally get into an airline. I mean, I've lived Perth, Exmouth, Port Hedland, Kalgoorlie, back to Perth, over to Sydney, up to Brisbane, down to Melbourne. So there's a lot of shifting. But once again, I love travel, so it's been enjoyable too.
Thank you, George. Look, before we get on to your role as a Vice President of the Union and the Virgin collapse, I've had a lot of insight from you about your responsibilities as a pilot, and you tick that box to say this plane is ready to fly. Can you share with everybody your responsibilities as a captain, ready to fly a plane with 300 and 400 people at a time?
Well, it's put it this way, it's not something you think about every day you go to work, because if you did, you wouldn't want to do it. You know, there's so many people supporting you in your role. You know that there's so many, you know, you're flying with some very competent guys. You don't get into an airline unless you've had all those years of experience. So you have some great support. We have a very safe aviation industry in this country, and it's not by chance. We have some world-renowned pilots as a reputation. We have a very safe air traffic control system in this country. We have a regulator that by and large does very well with its oversight, and we, relatively speaking to other parts of the world, our weather is quite benign. So we're quite lucky. We don't have huge mountain ranges, you know, like Europe or South America or even the United States. Our terrain is very flat, generally speaking. And so we have a safe system, Stacey. So getting back to your question, it's something that's there in the back of your mind.
Yeah, I've got it now.
But, you know, I just treat every day like I've got my family down the back. And if I do that, and self-preservation generally takes care of the rest.
Yes. Oh, thank you, George. That's a great insight. Next question, George, is around your position as Vice President of the Federation of Air Pilots. Now, George, I've known you long enough and I've learnt a lot from you in terms of you make very considered decisions and you don't just jump into doing something. And I know you put your hand up to become Vice President of the Federation of Australian Air Pilots. So why did you actually become Vice President? What drove you to do that?
Well, I've always had a fighting spirit in me. I mean, that's the Castellaresian in all of us, isn't it? Really,
It is.
You know, we don't lie down. The Federation of Air Pilots, it was something that I sort of fell into by osmosis, really. I took interest in our terms and conditions. I took interest in our safety. Even though we are a registered union, we were federated for a bit of history back in 1938, but it was actually formed in 1936 at the Moonee Ponds Town Hall.
Wow.
By a bunch of pilots who got together. And it was when the industry was, what you got to understand, you know, the Wright brothers really hadn't that long ago invented the aircraft. So the technological change from the first flight to the mid 30s was rapid. It was extreme.
Mm.
And so all of a sudden piloting became a profession, but there was no safety. There was no wage. Like, how do we pay these pilots? What do they get paid? So initially they were pegged to the Welders Award. And then these group of pilots got together and went, because nobody knew how to pay them. How are we going to pay these guys? This is a new job. So the Federation was formed because the pilots were getting kicked around. And there was a lot of jealousy involved with all these new operators because the pilots got the limelight. And And still to this day, there's a lot of jealousy involved in what we do, and it comes through. If you read Charles Kingsford Smith's book, he was, and the history on him, he was victimised as well. He was a bit of a rat bag, but a pioneer as well. But that's a great read if you ever get a chance. But you know, the owners of the aircraft he was flying around used to get upset because they'd go to events and Kingsford Smith would get all the accolade. Everybody wanted to talk to him, not to the owners of the new airline. So these guys formed the federation and have done some absolutely wonderful things. That organisation over the years contributed vastly to, you know, we just don't look after terms and conditions of pilots and improve them and defend them. We also have a very strong presence in the safety and test technical part of the industry, and also the welfare part of the industry for pilots as well. The welfare section was started, well, its inception came in about the mid-60s when pilots couldn't find income or health insurance. Nobody would cover them. Those that didn't pay. Those that did were very slow to pay, or would come into the market, take their insurance premiums, and then 2 or 3 years later. So once again, another group of guys got together and formed an annex to the federation called the Mutual Benefit Fund, and that was set up by pilots, for pilots, run by pilots, to cover them for loss of license or death, so their families weren't left in the lurch if their loved ones passed away, either during flying or otherwise. That fund today has about 120 million in it now. So, you know, that's a wonderful piece of history for the federation, is that, you know, from little things, very small things, big things do grow. They've been instrumental, the organisation, in things like distance measuring equipment, which was developed in Australia. It's now used all around the world. It came about because a DC-3 overflew Essendon years ago in fog and smashed into Mount Macedon. And so the federation was very upset that there was delays in having technological advances to support the pilots in this country. And so that piece of navigational equipment was partly developed in conjunction with the federation. We're involved in a lot of rules, regulations, formulation of legislation. So we're not just a union that solely looks after just the terms and conditions. We're a very evolved union, and you know, the way I approach things is anger is not a strategy. It doesn't work. Forming relationships with your management is what works. Working together with them to achieve good outcomes. Banging the desk is irrelevant. It doesn't get you any airtime at all. You have to be smart about the way you go about yourself, about how you conduct yourself. So I was drawn into the federation initially to be on the council for the Virgin Pilot Group, which was an annex inside the organisation, the Virgin Pilot Federation, which was an elected position. Then I was asked to be chair. I've been chair for 4 years of the Virgin Council. And in October last year, I was asked to nominate as vice president, and they're all elected positions. And yeah, I was elected as vice president, and I've been there since October. So we've got 5,500 members. We're the biggest pilot union in the country. We're the biggest helicopter union, pilots of helicopters in the world. We've got more helicopter pilots in our union than any other pilot union when it comes to helicopters. Yeah, and I'm very proud to be part of the association and the federation. And yeah, we'll keep doing our thing.
Continuing the legacy, George, a very long legacy.
And they're unpaid roles. So.
Thank you, George. It's a big commitment, but well done. So, George, this leads into a really big question. The collapse of Virgin has been a very public one, an international one. It has affected the lives of many, many people and families like yours. It's affected many businesses that are connected to the airline industry as well around the country. It's certainly broken our hearts many, many times. And this is your second collapse that you are actually experiencing with an airline. So a few questions here, George. How have you advocated for the pilots as Vice President of the Union during this collapse? So how have you advocated? But secondly, what has it been like for you to negotiate and meet with the prospective buyers of Virgin and the deal being closed with Bain Capital, and your negotiation and discussions continue? What has that been like, George?
I'd have to say mixed emotion, Anastasia. It's been, very sad, as I said before, to see the aviation industry, not just in this country, but around the world, in complete and utter mess. There's a lot of pilots that are my friends and colleagues that will probably never fly an aeroplane again. It's cut their careers short. They probably had 3 to 5 years left of flying in them. It's not the way they wanted to go out. The way I approached the whole process of the bidders during the administration, well, prior to going into administration, I engaged a lobbyist and we hit the government pretty hard at very senior levels, right into the Prime Minister's office, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Transport Minister, basically all the key stakeholders, Cormann, the Treasurer, to try and get support for the airline, because, as you say, airlines are really important infrastructure in this country. We don't have great train systems. We don't have great road systems. We're vast countries with a long time between drinks in between, our major cities and regional areas. So it's vitally important to the economy, the airline industry, and that was my big push with the Prime Minister and the politicians I was lobbying, that don't think somebody can just come in and fill this breach very quickly for reasons X, Y, Z, and they are, one of them being pilot training, and you just can't grab an aircraft and grab a pilot and say, go fly it. There's a whole process involved, as you were saying, months of training, and that creates a choke point of training. So, if you want to get this country going again and you want to get it going quick, you need airlines, and you need competitive attention between airlines to provide all you folk I'm looking at here now with a reasonable airfare to get from A to B, and not spend thousands of dollars because of lack of competition. So even though the lobbying wasn't successful in getting funding to keep the airline going, what it did was it created attention from bidders. I'm not taking full accolade for what's occurred. Business people buy businesses because they think they can make money out of them. But what it did give the impetus to a lot of these bidders was, and the government, that yes, we don't want another Ansett. We can't have another Ansett. We need to keep this country going, and air travel is vital to it. So 4 bidders came along. They all knocked on our door and said, we want to buy you Virgin, and we need to talk to you guys about us purchasing. So very quickly I worked out that we are in unprecedented times. So we need to live to fight another day. So concessions were the first thing that we presented to all the bidders: Cyrus Capital, Bain, BGH Capital, and the other one was Indigo Partners. And we said, we'll give you a memorandum of understanding to give you some flexibilities to retain as many pilots as you possibly can, and yet we'll give you flexibilities for our terms and conditions to get this airline running and give you the flexibility that's going to be required during this period when we're going to come out of this pandemic. That floored them, actually. One of them even said to me, I can't believe this, am I talking to a union? Which I didn't know how to take at the time. Subsequently, in hindsight, they were probably just wanting to take advantage of us. But that's not how I looked at it. You got to negotiate within the confines of where you are, of where the business is at. And through the discussions with Vaughan Strawbridge and Richard Hughes, who were the 2 main administrators for Deloitte.
The pain is just
the feedback we were getting from them was that, our strategy and what we were doing, Anastasia, was giving really good impetus for these guys to have some confidence to buy the business, and it was successful. So, this whole idea that unions can't help, if you get the right people at the top of these unions, they can be very effective. They can be very helpful towards a business, especially when you're controlling a large group of people that all do the same job. That's where the quintessential difference comes in. And here we are. The airline's going to come out of administration. It's going to be very leaner, but it's going to be a platform to grow. I've been able to negotiate with Bain a right of return for the pilots that have been made redundant. So if there's growth, these guys will be able to come back into the business, which we as a group are very proud of. That not a lot of industries do that when people are made redundant in different fields. It's like, see you later, bye bye. Piloting is very different. We just can't go and get another job somewhere else, and especially like Ansett. When Ansett collapsed, we could go work at Emirates or Qatar Airways or Cathay Pacific, or they're all in complete turmoil themselves. So that was a big win to be able to have that right of return.
You should be very proud of yourself, George. It wouldn't have been an easy thing to go through, and you're still going through it in a different sort of way. Just connected to your responses, George, when the borders open up, both domestically and globally, are we going to run out of pilots?
Yeah, I think we will. I think you initially no, because there's a lot of pilots on the market, and there will be. But where you're going to see it is, I'm 48 years of age. So, in the next 10 or 15 odd years, I'm going to retire. And so will all my generation. So the next generation coming through of pilots, we're probably going to see it in the next 5 to 10 years. Yes, there will be. Because right now is when you need the 17-year-old George Kailis to walk into a flying school and say, I want to become a pilot. What kid is going to do that right now? Their parents are going to say, you're not going to go anywhere near an aircraft at the moment. Look at this pandemic. Go and get a trade, go to university, go and do something else with your life. So we won't see it now, but yes, I reckon in the next 5 to 10 years, there'll be a big gap where nobody's trained, and then there'll be a big vacuum of experience, and that concerns me, because the number one important thing that you really need up the front of these aircraft is experience. You really do. It's I can't emphasize how much that experience that we all gain in the bush and flying around to dirt strips and middle of the night and scaring ourselves essentially is in good ways and bad. But that's one of the things that's also led to having a very safe aviation industry in this country, is having very experienced pilots. So yes, Stace, I'm concerned in years to come there'll be a void there.
Thank you, George. I have one final question. We have been very privileged to have been brought up by two incredible parents, amazing grandparents, and incredibly strong ancestry, can-do attitude, fighters, resilience, incredible stock that we all come from, everybody on the call. So what has kept you fighting for what you believe in, George? Just reflecting back from the moment you wanted to fly to tonight, reflecting on your story and your journey.
What's kept me in the fight? Well, I'm just a normal Kazzie. You're never out of the fight, are you?
Let's all clap to that one. Yeah, but also, George, you've got a lot of resilience as well. And I know that the Kazzie spirit is alive in you too. Is there anything else that just keeps you fighting? I know you've got a gorgeous family that are there to support and for you to fight for as well.
I'm just very passionate about my industry, and it's we've just got to keep fighting on all fronts to keep it safe. It's not just about money. It's about ensuring that our terms and conditions aren't just about money. you know, over the years, I've seen negotiating agreements where they've wanted to put just work rule practices into our agreements that are just nothing short of just ridiculous and dangerous. And, you know, it's keeping that industry safe. It's keeping it safe for the public. It's keeping our reputation safe. And that's what fuels it for me. You know, we just can't let that be. We've got to guard it the whole time. And, you know, they're always coming at us from different angles. And, you know, no, it's not going to happen on my watch.
Thank you, George. George, it's a real honour to be your sister. I've learned so much from you, and I am still learning, especially the way you negotiate and strategize. Thank you for that. Hats off to you. Love you heaps, and thank you for letting me interview you tonight.
Good on you, Stace. Thank you, and likewise to, you know, and thanks to Mum on the line. Couldn't have done what I've done without the support of family. And yeah, thank you. And thanks to my in-laws on the line too. They're always in my corner.
Yeah, thank you. Over to you, Nick.
Thanks, George. That was fantastic. Any questions? Does anyone want to ask George any questions? If Caroline could take everyone off mute, please, and just raise your hand and we'll just pick. Lena?
Yeah, I do. George, it's Lena Coates. With the pilots not flying for a while now, when they do go back, is there training, etc., that you have to do to refresh, or because it may be not till middle of next year, whatever, till you get up and running?
There is, Lena, and we're still doing it now, even though we aren't flying. So we still get rostered for our simulator training, which is, you know, under the requirements of the Civil Aviation Authority. We have what they call recency requirements, where we have to go into the simulator and do X amount of takeoff landings, what they call instrument approaches, where we land the aircraft in ordinary visibility, you know, low cloud, heavy rain, that sort of thing. So we have to maintain our emergency procedures. So yeah, they're keeping us up to date. And they're actually, even though we are sporadically flying, I've flown twice since March, which isn't a lot, and pilots become rusty. They're even making these training requirements or gaps in between shorter. The airline's doing that, which is great, which is an added extra level of safety upon what the Civil Aviation Authority require.
George, can I just ask one quick question?
Yeah.
Our landing strip there, someone told
What landing strip?
they
water?
reckon some pilots actually have to try and land on Gustaloris. It's one of the hardest in the simulators. It's one of the hardest to land because it's such a short runway and the wind. Is that true, or is that a?
Yeah, no, I've heard that, Nick, and when I was on Gustaloris or with my mum back in when was that, 2015, I went up there and had a look at the airstrip because I wanted to see it because I've heard it's quite infamous, and yeah, that doesn't look like a lot of fun.
My poor brother John, when he was going into Gustaloris, he said they had to have 3 attempts, and he was doing his stavro on the way in because they nearly missed it.
And there wouldn't be much room for error, Christine, because you're not Turkish airspace either, so you wouldn't want to wander too far to the east there. You might get into trouble.
On another point, George, my late husband was a pilot, but he did it as a hobby.
Right.
And it was from Moorabbin Airport, and it was just amazing, the things that he had to do before you got on the plane.
Expensive hobby, Christine.
Yeah. But being a commercial pilot,
Connie.
there's much more involved, much more, I think.
There's a lot to it.
Yeah, he had a little 350 Cessna.
Lovely.
Yeah, lovely.
Connie.
It's amazing, though.
Connie.
Connie, go, Connie.
Okay. You just said that you were doing keeping up with training, simulation and everything. Does that mean that you're actually being paid?
Please.
Can you hear me?
Sorry, Connie, I got the keeping up with the simulation.
Right. Does that mean that you're being paid by Virgin at the moment or not?
Only when I go in and do those training sessions. So no, I'm technically stood down.
Right.
And I'm on JobKeeper.
Can I ask?
So yeah, it's been an interesting time, Connie. Yeah,
Painted the house, I suppose.
I have painted the house amongst saving an airline from administration and homeschooling 2 kids. It's 2020 is going to be a very memorable year for all of us, I'm sure.
We have a question from Evelyn Tavares in the chat. I'll just read it out. She says, thank you for your presentation. What opportunities do women have who wish to take a career as a pilot?
It's a really good question. The industry has over the last.
Go on, George. Just so someone's got a radio on in the background. Can they please
Just shut the door, Jackie, will you please?
someone turn the radio off, please? Thank you. Go. Sorry, George.
Yeah, there has been a really big push by the industry as a whole to get more women into aviation. There has been a real big uptake of females coming into the industry, which is fantastic to see. It's still not enough. There should be more. They're welcome with open arms. We have our president of the association, Louise Poll. This is her second term as president of the Federation of Air Pilots. She's our first female president. She's very active. She started the women's network inside the federation, which is fantastic, trying to attract more women to the industry. The only thing I think, once women get into the industry, we see a lot leave. And I don't know why. And it's not because they're not treated well. They're welcome with open arms. I'd have to say there's 2 or 3 pilots that I've mentored some of my flying off when I was a first officer at Virgin. There was 2 or 3 captains that I used to fly with. Obviously, I don't anymore because I became a captain and you don't fly with them anymore, who were female. And they were some of the most talented pilots that I'd flown with. I think it becomes very hard when in the industry, just like any vocation, when these female pilots want to have a family, and it's a very, very difficult career to be a parent in, whether you're male or female. Because we're pure shift workers, we work 365, 24/7, Christmas, Easter. You miss a lot. And I think some of them just go, you know what, I don't want to do this. I'm going to concentrate on my children and my family. And some make a very good balance of it. But we need more female pilots. They're fantastic. Their abilities are, I'm going to have to say, a lot better than some of the guys. A lot better.
Can I ask a question?
I think
Sure.
Lawrence.
It's very similar to what Evelyn just asked, but I'm quite intrigued. When you talked about selection, you talked about it's a highly regarded profession. So you talked about merit. You talked about emotional intelligence. You talked about personality as a necessity to enter, but you didn't talk about networking. And you can't tell me that how come only a certain class of society apply to be pilots? Where's the access for the lower income people? How do they make it? Do you have traineeships? Do you sponsor them in those vital hours when you're paying hundreds of thousands to get your hours up?
Flo, it's a really good question. And it's something that I've been very passionate about. We've set up what they call a leading edge program at the Federation to create a mentoring group where we get guys that have, like myself, and we stick our hands up to be mentors for anybody that has friends or family or wants to make a connection with the Federation. You can make contact. And, I've mentored quite a number of of people from all walks of life, from all demographics. It's not an elitist profession where people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds get weeded out. Some of my closest friends are from who are now captains with Qantas and Cathay Pacific, for the want of not sounding snobby, because I don't mean to be, have come from very low socioeconomic backgrounds, and they just get treated and have to prove themselves like the rest of us. We have a sponsorship program where we have a scholarship. Now the universities and the government have HECS, so you can go and do an aviation degree at Swinburne University, Edith Cowan, where you can get your flying subsidised. And I strongly recommend to a lot of the young kids that come along, the military is a fantastic avenue for where your pilot training is going to get paid for. Your accommodation is going to get paid for. They'll pay for your university degree as well, if that's what you choose to do at the same time before you do your pilot's course. Your dental, your medical, and it's a guaranteed job if you want to stay in the military. They're screaming for pilots now. Well, they were up until COVID-19.
I just thought with, didn't you mention there's a lot of money in your kitty? The Pilots Federation, do they sponsor direct?
Yes, they do. They do, and so do we. We have to keep that fund there because we represent 5,500 pilots. So, we have a death benefit of $1 million if a pilot dies. And also if they lose their license, we have to pay them a percentage of their income during the process. So at any point in time, 5,500 pilots, you're always going to have about 3 to 5% that are going to have medical issues. Now, we have to pass a medical every year. So we have to have an ECG, we have to have our bloods done, we have to have our eyes checked. We have a full medical that goes through us every year. So we have to look after our health, so to speak. So we need that money in that fund that we can't just hand out willy-nilly. It's got to be there. At any point in time, we can sometimes offload $17 million a year out of that fund. It's not infinitum. And we have to ensure that there's a nest egg there that we can keep representing pilots for years to come.
Hi, George. Can I? Well, hello, cousin.
Hello. How are you?
Good. Can I ask you a question about technology, about planes,
Sure.
the evolution in the last few years, especially since we had the grounding of the 737 Maxes and all that. And what's your thought on a plane being easier to fly nowadays because of technology? Is it, or in your opinion, it isn't?
I sometimes think that the technology is making pilots lazy. It's taking control of the aircraft away from them to the point where when that technology fails, there's going to be a generation of pilots that won't be able to fall back on, the experience that I've had out in the bush flying all these aircraft that don't have all this technology in it. So they're calling this next generation of pilots the children of the magenta. So our navigational screens have a magenta line on them. When you program the computer properly, the aircraft will follow that magenta line. We just have to configure the aircraft if we're doing an auto land, which means put the gear down, put the flaps out, set the auto brakes, and the aircraft can land itself. We still have to monitor it. We still have to know what it's doing. But just that hand-eye coordination, those skills is being lost. And what the regulatory bodies around the world are now doing, and even the manufacturers of Airbus and Boeing, they're recommending more hand flying goes into the training, more failures of the automatics is introduced into the training matrices that pilots go through. So, you know, having that automatics all of a sudden disappear, you go, oh yeah, okay, whatever. It's just another aircraft now, but now I'm flying it. There's a lot of... Yeah.
Can I ask, well, when the plane lands hard, is that because of the pilot or is that because of the autopilot?
Generally, it's the pilot.
Evelyn's trying to ask a question, but evidently she's off. I think she wanted to know roughly the cost of being a pilot training.
I'll read out the question. It's,
oh, you're there. Good.
what is the cost to train as a civil pilot, and how many pilots are trained via the Air Force?
The Air Force, I think, run, well, it depends on their retirement rate in the Air Force. I never went through the military. I'm just going off what, you know, I've been told from the military pilots or ex-military pilots that are friends and that I've flown with. It depends on how many, or the rate of pilots that are leaving the RAF, but they generally run 2 or 3 courses a year. They go for 66 weeks. Most of them have gone to ADFA first and have done a degree, so that some of them do philosophy, arts, science, engineering degrees. Some of them do aeronautical engineering degrees, and then they do pilot's course. They generally start with somewhere in the order of, I think about 70 to 80 pilots per course, and they generally end up with 20 to 30 that actually pass. Civilian, these days, it's very, very costly to get all your licenses now. So you need your private pilot's license, your unrestricted pilot's license, your commercial pilot's license, and then your multi-engine instrument rating, so you can fly twin engine or multi-engine aircraft in all weather. And then you have to do your airline transport pilot's licensing theory exams. There's 7 or 8 of those now. You're probably looking in the order of, you know, $100,000 to $150,000. So it's a massive investment. And that's why I say to people who say my child wants to be a pilot, and I say, do they really want to be a pilot? Because it's not just the resilience and the school of hard knocks that you're about to enter. It's a big cost, and it's not something you want to invest in and not use.
Thanks.
And George, can I just add to that? This is Con here, Con Prasalis. There's also, you can spend all that money in the airport, and there's always no guarantees you will actually finish up your dream job as an airline pilot. Yeah.
That's right. There's a lot of people, Con, that I learned to fly with that dropped off along the way. Yeah. I'd have to say those that did stick at it, they all achieved their dream in some shape or form. It may not have necessarily been the airline that they wanted to specifically work for, because you take the first job that comes up.
Yeah.
You know, you just can't. So even though I'm a captain of a Boeing 737, if I said, I don't want to work at Virgin now, I want to go work for Qantas, yeah, I would start at the bottom of their seniority list. I would be a second officer, then I'd have to be a first officer, then I'd have to be a captain. I'd go through the whole ranks again. The same thing would occur if I went to Emirates or Qatar. I'd be a first officer first. So it's a job for life. Once you get into an airline, you generally don't want to leave it, because otherwise the only other opportunity is you go on the contract, you know, on the contract circuit, where, you know, prior to COVID-19, there was the shortage of pilots, so there was contracts all around the world, in China, mainly Southeast Asia and China, that were extremely high-paying jobs, but, you know, they were high-risk, high-reward jobs. Once you go into that expat world, for the want of a better phrase, you are a second-class citizen up there. You're there because they need you. You're not there because they want you. And you're the first first group of pilots that are always shifted out the door if things contract, being an expat on the contract circuit. But the reward is big salaries, and some of the guys I know have gone and done that, and it's been very successful for them, and others quite disaster.
Any more questions?
Yes, Evelyn Silvaris has another question to ask George.
I think she wants to become a pilot.
Okay, Evelyn's question in the chat is, due to the hiatus due to the COVID pandemic, what retraining and how many flying hours will pilots who've been stood down have to undertake to return to flying?
That's all dependent on how long you've been out of the system. So we have, I'm going to get a bit technical here. We have a 45-day recency requirement. We have a 90-day recency requirement. We have a 6-monthly recency requirements. The 6-monthly one is where we have to revalidate our licenses by a check and training captain. So that goes over a 2-day simulator, 8 hours of simulator, where they do all the nasty stuff and fail engines on us and depressurize the aircraft. And, you know, it's a true simulation. So much so that you can learn to fly that aircraft in that simulator and then be able to go and fly the real aircraft with never having touched a real aircraft. It's that real, and the simulation is such that if you crash the simulator, you've crashed an aircraft. So there's that requirement. The 45 days is takeoff and landings. The 90 days is takeoff and landings. And then if you go outside that 6 months, then it becomes more. You go outside 12 months, it's even more and more and more. So there's no straight answer to that. Suffice to say that the longer you're out of the seat, the more training is required to go back into it.
George, I just want to ask you, any concerning experiences on the plane by flying with people in it?
Yeah, never really to do with the actual aircraft, Nick. They're so reliable. If you serviced your aircraft or your car like these aircraft get serviced, your car would outlive you. Yeah. The engineering and that goes into these aircraft, it's a testament to the human, really.
Yeah.
Most of it comes from weather.
Yeah. Is
where most of our stress comes from, and the anxiety that can come from that.
Yeah.
Fuel's a finite amount when you've got it on an aircraft. So, you know, things like unforecast weather gets your attention pretty quick. You know, it's a beautiful morning, you're flying from Melbourne to Sydney, the sun's coming up, it's just another beautiful day at work.
Yeah.
Weather on the eastern seaboard's lovely, and then all of a sudden air traffic control says, hazard alert, Sydney, fog's rolled in, airport's closed. And the world lights up pretty quick.
Yeah,
because you don't have the fuel. So you've got to make decisions very quickly. And it's people. A lot of the stress that's come is from passengers having heart attacks, anaphylactic reactions, unruly passengers, people that are drunk.
I mean, a lot of people cause a lot of trouble, and you can't really do much about it.
No, not when you're in a steel tube at 38,000 feet. No.
What about can I ask a question?
Yeah, last question now. Thank you.
George, what about the risks of COVID flying now from here on?
Well, nobody knows, do they, really, where this is all going to go. I mean, the aircraft do have HEPA filters, which are just hospital grade. They do filter out a lot. I don't know where it's all going to go in relation to that, to be honest, and that's one of the things that does keep me up at night.
Yes.
Look, thank you very much, George. I just want to let you know now we're all family to you now, so that we get cheap air flight tickets.
Good on you, Nick. Nick, do you mind? I think Litza wanted to ask one question.
Sorry. All right, just one more, because we've just got another person.
All right.
Put on. So
just a quick one.
Sorry.
Thank you for. It's been very interesting. I just got a quick question. How often do pilots
let's have medical examinations.
Once a year we have it, and if you're still commercially flying over the age of 60, every 6 months.
Okay.
So,
All right, that's reassuring.
That's it. Thank you very much for your time, and I'd like to thank your family that have tuned in from interstate and from Melbourne, and Anastasia for organising her brother tonight.
Here.
Just before we go, I just got one other gentleman I just want to put on. Jeffrey, are you there? Jeff Conahan? You there, mate?
He's there.
Yep.
He's there.
I just want to Jeffrey is going for, he's running as an independent at the moment for the Port Phillip council elections. And I just want to wish him all the best on behalf of all the Kazzies. He's been a great supporter to our club, and we just hope he does very well in these future elections. I'll just get him just to mention something for about 5 minutes. If you can just talk about what your intentions are doing if that you want to do if you get in, Jeff. And yeah, just ask a couple of questions to be asked for the next 5 minutes, and that's it.
My vote already.
It won't be 5 minutes. I'm sure everybody wants to have dinner. I know from my family, never get between a Castellarigian and the kitchen. It's a dangerous place to be. So I'm standing in the municipality of Port Phillip in Lake Ward. The suburbs that covers is St Kilda, West St Kilda, Middle Park, and Albert Park. And the club is actually just out of that zone, but of course it's in the city of Port Phillip. So they're the suburbs. Nick, to answer your question, what's my immediate goal? Like most people who want to run for council, they actually want to get a better deal for the residents that live there. And I think anybody who's been to St Kilda in the last couple of years would see a sad and sorry decline of Fitzroy Street and of Ackland Street, and a number of us fear that it's going to spread. So these are all very local issues. However, if any club members have friends, family, contacts in St Kilda, West St Kilda, Middle Park and Albert Park, please ask them to look for the Greek with the Irish name. You can't miss him. The elections across all of Victoria this year, we should get our ballot papers from today and tomorrow. They'll be delivered, and it's all by postal vote this year. There's no election booths anywhere in Victoria for local elections because of COVID. So remember to vote. And of course, if you're in Lake Ward, Port Phillip, vote for the Greek with the Irish name. Thanks.
Any questions there for Jeff? Nothing? Okay.
Jeff, all the best. You know, all the best, and good on you for having a crack. It's fantastic.
It is. Jeff, I wish I'd met you 20 years ago, because I lived in St Kilda for 20 years and I led a charge with the retailers to try and stop Ackland Street from closing and getting the big terminus there. So it's a shame we didn't cross paths earlier.
Yeah.
But here we are.
here we are.
And I'm in South Melbourne, so I've just missed out.
Never too late.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey, I spoke to you on the phone. I'm Diane from Middle Park.
Diane from Middle Park.
So we'll vote. You've got our vote.
Well, that's good, because I can't kiss babies or dogs because of COVID, Diane. So thanks for the vote without having to kiss your dog. I appreciate it.
Anyway, thank you. Now, before I go, I'd like to. It's good to see Paul Gregory and George Virginis out of hospital and doing very well and joining us tonight and supporting us. It's great. And also, I'd like to thank the Consul-General, Dimitrios Michalopoulos, and George Kailis.
It was great.
Again, and Jeffrey Conahan. I really appreciate your time. And I'm very impressed with the information that we've received tonight, and I hope everyone's enjoyed it. If anyone wants to stay on, I'm sorry, Lena, I've taken over your position tonight.
No, that's wonderful.
Next time you're doing it. This wasn't supposed to be my Guernsey, but anyway. But is anyone who wants to ask any questions to me or any of the committee, or is there any questions?
Who have you got next month, Nick?
Well, this is
Progress at the moment.
Yeah, that'll be
announced.
It's very interesting. We've used to find it hard trying to get people to come on board and help us, and now we had to knock everyone back. So we've been inundated with people ringing us to come on board and to talk. So which is a very positive thing. And Lena and I will talk about it next week, but Lena will make the decision. She's the boss. She's the boss. Right?
Congratulations.
Yes, it's great.
Thank
you.
Constantine, you want to say something, mate?
I'm on my way. I've got to go. So thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Nick and
Thank
Lena.
you. Thanks, George. Thanks, Stacey. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
It's been great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good night, all. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Anastasia.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
You were born to fly, George. You were born to fly.
Yeah, thank you.